Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. Welcome to the engaging summary of White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism, by Robin DiAngelo. In this book, the author explores the complex issues surrounding race, prejudice, and racism, giving valuable insights into understanding them better. The summary will delve into the social construct of race, the differences between racial prejudice, discrimination, and racism, and the assumptions that white people make to protect themselves from acknowledging their privileges. Furthermore, the summary highlights the ideologies that perpetuate racism and the emotional reactions that emerge when discussing the topic, hindering progress in addressing it.
Understanding the social construct of race in America. White fragility is a product of misunderstanding and denial, both of which reinforce and stem from racism in American society. Race is a social construct rather than a biological reality, and its function in society is the key to understanding it. In the United States, race resolved a contradiction between the ideal of equality and extreme inequalities, shaping the country's foundation. Race science, or pseudoscience, falsely claimed African Americans were naturally inferior to ensure their enslavement and justify European American privileges. The racial designations of black and white emerged within this context. The shifting history of white and black. The labels white and black are not as straightforward as they seem. Originally, only certain groups of European descent were considered white, while people of other ethnicities were excluded. The definition of white expanded over time, and U.S. law reinforced this distinction by codifying whiteness as a form of privileged legal status. Meanwhile, people classified as black were not allowed to assimilate or enjoy the same legal rights as those classified as white. The resulting inequality has seeped into all aspects of American society and is still present today. Understanding racism, prejudice, and discrimination. Racism occurs when a racial group has more power than another and incorporates their prejudices into society's laws, norms, and policies. Racial prejudice is a prejudgment based on someone's racial group, while discrimination is acting on that prejudice. Anyone can be prejudiced or discriminate against anyone from a different racial group, but only the more powerful group can implement systemic racism. Black people can't be racist as they lack the power to oppress white people systematically. The birth of white fragility. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 helped cultivate a one-dimensional understanding of racism. Most white people were appalled by images of violent white supremacists, and the legislation made racial prejudice and discrimination illegal. Thus, racists were viewed as malicious individuals who hated black people, leading to a cartoonish understanding of racism. To claim that someone is racist can cause them to feel unfairly insulted, leading to a state of defensive behaviors known as white fragility. False assumptions about racism. White people often shield themselves from accusations of racism through faulty assumptions that rely on an incorrect premise, equating racism with individual immorality. These assumptions take the form of an "I" statement, such as, "I didn't intend to be racist, so my words or actions couldn't have been racist," or "I'm a good person, so I can't be racist." The problem with these assumptions is not faulty logic, but rather incorrect premise. The notion that racism is no longer a problem is patently false and can be refuted by empirical data. It is impossible to be completely free of racial prejudices as it stems from the unconscious nature of our biases. The camouflage of racism. In modern America, expressing racial prejudices is no longer socially acceptable. As a result, many white Americans resort to using coded language that camouflages their racial biases, making it difficult to detect or even recognize. They have become highly segregated in where they choose to live, predominantly in neighborhoods dominated by fellow white Americans. This white flight is a phenomenon that has been well documented and even formalized. White Americans defending this choice use words like safe, clean, and sheltered, which have grown to become code words for describing white neighborhoods. This coded language, while not mentioned explicitly in racial terms, makes it possible for white people to be actively racist without appearing outwardly so. Consequently, many white Americans have little or no ongoing relationships with Black Americans and are, therefore, racially insulated. This insulation is reinforced by society and culture in many ways, from the schools they attend, the jobs they work to the books they read and movies they watch. The paradox of white privilege. White privilege refers to the advantages that white people enjoy because of their skin color. Although the term is often contentious, it describes the fact that white people benefit from a sense of belonging to the dominant culture and a presumption of innocence that people of color do not share. The media, the criminal justice system, and social norms reinforce these prejudices, leading to disproportionate outcomes for people of color. While white people might not themselves perceive their advantages, they must recognize the disparities and work to counteract them. Unpacking white privilege. White privilege is not just about individual attitudes towards people of color. Rather, it is built on the institutionalized dominance of white people over people of color. Institutions of power such as the media and the criminal justice system are controlled by white people, who tend to reproduce the white-centric cultures and communities in which they have grown up. As a result, white people enjoy advantages such as a higher representation in American culture and a lower chance of being arrested or imprisoned. This privilege is not dependent on personal intentions or overt racial discrimination, but rather on systemic racism. White people are socialized into a society that benefits them at the expense of people of color, and denying this fact only perpetuates racism. Ideologies that perpetuate racism. The ideologies of individualism, meritocracy, and objectivity aid in perpetuating racism in America by justifying inequalities between racial groups. White fragility is a concept that explains white defensiveness when faced with discussions of race and racism. The book, White Fragility, explores the various assumptions that lead to this fragility. Three ideologies, namely, individualism, meritocracy, and objectivity, play crucial roles in the formation of white fragility. Individualism posits that individuals can determine their destinies without influence from society or groups to which they belong. Meritocracy, on the other hand, rewards people based on their merits, skills, and efforts. These two ideologies jointly help to justify the ongoing inequalities in America, such as income disparities between white and black people. White people, for instance, can justify their wealth by assuming they worked harder for it than black people. Objectivity, the third ideology, holds that people can be free from biases. It dovetails with individualism, leading white people to deny the existence of racial biases. When combined, these ideologies enable white Americans to deny racism both as a societal and personal problem. The result of these ideologies is white Americans justifying their inequalities while shifting the blame to black people for allegedly being lazy or lacking gumption. The author argues that the only way to challenge white fragility and overcome racism is by acknowledging and rejecting these assumptions that fuel its growth. Fragility of white denial. The book exposes how white people's racist behaviors, unexamined privileges, and assumptions uphold the natural outcome of a meritocracy they believe in and how it leads them to deny that racism exists and feel comfortable. The psychological contraption put together as a result is weakly disguised and tends to crumble at the slightest provocation, causing a surge in negative emotions. The article gives a detailed analysis of this fragility, how it affects people of color, and the implications of it all. Fragility and racism. The book explores the predictable emotional reactions that white people exhibit when confronted with racism. White fragility plays a major role in reinforcing racism by preventing the problem from being discussed or examined. The author illustrates this by sharing examples from her anti-racism workshops. Many people of color and white anti-racism advocates avoid entering into conversations with whites for fear of negative reactions. The author argues that acknowledging and discussing the issue is the first step toward solving it.
In conclusion, White Fragility is an eye-opening examination of how race, prejudice, and racism work in American society, and the book sheds light on the uncomfortable truths behind white privilege and racial inequality. Through the exploration of the social construct of race and the history of black and white designations, we can see how racial prejudice and discrimination are intricately linked to racism. The key takeaway is that acknowledging and confronting white fragility is essential to tackling the systemic nature of racism, as it is nearly impossible to address any problem without first admitting its existence. As readers, we must recognize these issues and strive for a more equitable and just society in our quest to foster better understanding and unity among all races.